The Nigerian economy has been subsidized in various ways for many years, and these include fuel, education, electricity, forex, among others. Fuel subsidy began in the 70s and became institutionalized in 1997 following the promulgation of Price Control Act, which made it illegal for some products, including petrol, to be sold above regulatory price. While the concept of subsidy itself is noble, its administration in Nigeria has been plagued with serious allegations of corruption, mismanagement. For 13 years after diesel was deregulated, the kerosene subsidy was removed in 2016. However, recent subsidy removal of petroleum motor spirit through PMS, though applauded by many Nigerians, has come with a challenge of inflation. We start off this discussion this morning with a focus on how inflation can be tackled with the removal of fuel subsidy for Greater Nigeria. We have in the studio Dr. Jamil Mohammed. Dr. Jamil is an analyst and an economist. It's a pleasure to have you join us as always.
Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for always making it. We also have joining us virtually Dr. Aliu Audu. Dr. Aliu Audu is the Vice President of the Nigeria Irish Business Association from Abuja, of course. Dr. Aliu, it's a pleasure to have you join us digitally.
Thank you. Good morning.
I was tempted to think that we were talking to you from Ireland, but it's good to know that you're still here. Helping us to conserve some
Yes,
funds.
I'm here for now.
All right. So we start with Dr. Jamil. Since the swearing in of this new president, a whole lot has happened in the economy. We went, I mean, if we were to use the expression of a turtle, we went from zero to near 100 within a few days. You know, the announcement of the removal of subsidy, the announcement of the unification or devaluation or whatever language is preferred for the exchange rates. Now we are hearing that that of electricity is also going and likely prices would go up. We are seeing people react. As a matter of fact, the Daily Trust headline today is telling us that RAM for the festivity are selling for as high as 700,000. The kind of amount you need to buy a plot of land in Lugbe and other adjoining areas of the city. We suddenly have been thrown into a situation people are beginning to contemplate the entirety of their existence around this place because we would see trickle-down effects to house rents, transports have gone over the roof, and all of that. How do you think Nigerians would be able to deal with what appears to be a tsunami on their way of life?
Thank you very much. Good morning. I know Nigerians to be very resilient, most especially in matters like this. Most especially with the background that we've seen these things coming. Only if we had neglected them, but definitely we saw them coming. Time and again, I have said in this studio that subsidy, whatever regime of subsidy, is unsustainable economically. Instead of calling it subsidy, you can introduce welfareist programs, interventionist programs. You can introduce that, but keep subsidy itself separate from these programs, because there is nowhere in the world economically where subsidy is permanent, and you can't make it varied on a large spectrum of your economy. You have subsidy in power, you have subsidy in education, you have subsidy. The main thing is people have been looking at, say, the fuel subsidy. And the reaction that greeted the so-called removal of the fuel subsidy actually is unprecedented. By what we have known in the past, the subsidy regime is supposed to end the 30th of this month. That is what was provided in the budget.
By design.
By design. I don't know, not even by design. But that was the budget that was presented.
But the NNPC would argue with you that it was just a mere provisions, that pronouncements, but there was no cash backing.
Well, it does not matter whether there's a cash backing or not. it was a bill, and the bill was passed as an act.
Right. Appropriated.
Appropriated. So it does not matter whether there was cash backing or not. If something has been appropriated, if it is not followed, then I don't know who we should hold responsible. If it is the president, then this alone is an impeachable offense. So I don't think we should rely on that. What we know is that subsidy is supposed to go 30th of this month. So 1 month before 30th, when it was announced, why did the prices, why would fuel price jump up? I don't know how the government operated this. I don't know why the government was not able to regulate this, to tell the fuel marketers, subsidy is still being given to you for the next 1 month. So you are not supposed to raise your prices for this moment. Right. So as far as I'm concerned, either the government has neglected this, or that the marketers have jumped over this and are profiteering over Nigerians on this issue.
And clearly you did talk about Nigerians and their resilience. While it is something to acknowledge, most people would argue that Nigerians lack the shock absorbers to absorb everything that is going on right now. We've seen families pushed to the brink. Education has already been suffering, where enrollment has been low, especially in northern part of Nigeria, and most of the excuse from parents has been lack of financial wherewithal to actually support the education of their children. And I suppose with this rising inflation now, you see a lot more of that happening going into the future. What can you say with regards to how, international practices support the rolling out of policies like this, for instance, where you're trying to take away certain interventionist policies, whether it's subsidy removal, and you're trying to apply something that would cushion the effect so that it will stabilize the polity for most people who are barely trying to make ends meet, because we understand now that the inflation is up by 5.3% year on year, and that in itself is something very significant for most Nigerians.
Normally what we are lacking in a certain structure. You see, there is this social services. Normally, a government like this, we are supposed to have a social register of Nigerians. Not just this social register by NSIP, not that. From our National Population Commission, this data should have been there. Now, look at how we calculate. Some of these problems are structural in the economy. I have argued that certain indices, our economic managers are supposed to throw away certain indices. Something like when they say GDP per capita. GDP per capita only looks at what a country, what individuals from a country are supposed to benefit from. Okay, but if you are calculating GDP per capita on a general population, and GDP production is by labor, why not use the labor population instead of the general population? That will give you an idea of what you have. So structurally,
but I mean, the GDP per capita is usually just nominal, isn't it?
Yes, it's nominal, but it guides them in planning.
Right.
As far as the planning stage is concerned, you can eliminate this, because this is the cycle from which they give out all these so-called interventions or freebies or whatever. So if you remove that, it will give you a clear guide of what you are supposed to deploy. Now, what they are trying to deploy at this moment is the kind of things they deployed when there was this COVID issue. You see, you in economics, normally you have to be very prudential. You have to be very, very prudential. You don't just deploy things out of just mere thinking. Or if you flood the economy with more than what it requires, that's part of what will distort the economy, and you start seeing this kind of inflation. This our inflation is not just the nominal inflation or the actual inflation we know. There's a lot of distortion in it. And to sit down and bring out these distortions requires a lot of homework.
All right. Doctor, I would like you to hold your thoughts there while we hear from Dr. Audu. Doctor, if you're with us, I'm sure you have listened to some of the submissions of Dr. Jamil. One of the areas of concerns for most Nigerians would be whether there were thorough empirical studies before some of the actions or pronouncements of the president were made. Were there knee-jerk? Were there studies that suggested the impact of this pronouncement? And I say this with all sense of reason. I mean, Dr. Jamil had mentioned how the kind of subsidies we run are not sustainable. But in the case of petroleum, there is so much corruption happening in that place that has made it unsustainable, not because the subsidy in itself is not ideal, considering the kind of impact we are seeing from that removal today. I mean, if we are saying 60 million liters of fuel is not daily consumption, it could be something less. Why not fight the corruption that balloons that figure to what government cannot sustain, rather than throw the baby and the bathwater away? Today we have the removal of tuition by disguise with the Student Loan Act now signed into law, which basically leave everybody at this vigil, and you are now saying it will be open to only families who are considered poor. And we are talking about 100 million people poor in Nigeria. So, do you think there should have been some kind of studies that would have sort of suggested this, that would have shown an impact assessment of what the carrying capacity or the breaking points of Nigerians will be, rather than just wake up one morning and say these things are not sustainable, this must go, that must go, and that must go, and then worsening or compounding the living standard of your citizens rather than address them? Because in the long run, everybody is dead anyway.
Yeah, thank you very much. You're quite correct. I see your point in terms of there should be an impact study, an evaluation to see the impact this will have on Nigerians in terms of the removal of the subsidy, the economic effects. And, because believe it or not, majority of Nigerians are poor. Now, I recall that there was a loan that was supposed to come from the World Bank, about 800 million, which was meant to create palliatives to cushion the effect of subsidy. Now, logically speaking, if the government cannot sustain subsidy, especially as you have said now that this subsidy, we are not only supporting Nigerians, we are supporting other African countries, Niger, Cameroon. As we have taken off subsidy now, you see that they are also, the cost of their petrol has gone up. So what we should be focusing is on Nigerians. I believe that the study for this has long been done, because everybody knows that subsidy is taken out, and we all know that majority of Nigerians cannot afford it. Then the ideal thing is to bring palliatives to cushion this effect. I remember the president talking about bringing in, increasing the minimum wage to help with cushioning this effect, to help majority of Nigerians. Also the introduction of palliatives. Now there should be some form of social incentives being introduced, like it's done in developed countries, where if people are unemployed, there's a certain amount of money that goes to them, the welfare system. We need to introduce that. We have witnessed a president that has come in that is more serious with the economy of Nigeria and with the plights of Nigerians. So I believe what we can do is to make policy suggestions to the new administration. Remember, they are less than a month old. So we need to give them more time in order to adopt these policies. And we don't want a situation whereby the government will run broke and the government cannot function, and we have to keep depending on foreign aid and foreign loans. Right. Already, we're running a budget deficit. So the practicality of keeping a subsidy is not there. And
Doctor,
we don't want a few Nigerians to go out and get rich on subsidy while majority of Nigerians are suffering.
right.
So in my view, the introduction of this policy is in the right direction, but we need to introduce, aside the palliatives that the government is announcing, which include increase in minimum wage and also palliatives. I hear there are going to be mass transit buses that would move people from one side to another. These are things that could be done to cushion the effect for majority of Nigerians.
Doctor, I mean,
But
there's a whole conversation the organized labor is having with the government that covers a wide range of issues around that. There's the CNG conversation, there's the issue about the refineries, there's the issue around reforms in education and so on and so forth. But with regards to what is happening right now, because Nigerians want to understand how the government is trying to protect their interests by looking at the human cost that is the consequence as a result of the removal of the fuel subsidy. The president, during the inauguration of the Economic Council, did call on the governors to take up the burden and share the responsibility of, putting out those palliatives that would cushion the effects. Some state governments are rolling out fertilizer at a subsidized rate for farmers, even though farmers are saying that it is still at a very high price. Give me a sense of how you think the subnationals can key into cushioning the effect for Nigerians at their own level, because at the end of the day, the states actually have all the burden to bear when it comes to really cushioning the effect that Nigerians are feeling right now.
Yeah, absolutely. The states have a role to play, and as we said, the burden cannot fall only on the federal government. It is expected that the states would also key into it by paying salaries on time. And, we've had in the past that states are not paying, and also palliatives. We saw during the COVID that states had their COVID palliatives that were even kept and not distributed to Nigerians, and this caused uproar. So the states have to work in pari passu with the federal government to cushion this. It's no more business as usual. We all know that Nigeria has a promising future. We have a robust agricultural industry. We have a robust solid mineral industry. So it is time for the states to start engaging their individuals, bring in investors to invest in their various states and create jobs. I was in Dublin last year to promote a summit, an investment summit, in order to bring Nigerian investors into Nigeria, to bring foreign investors into Nigeria. So it is no more business as usual. States need to be hands-on. We need to bring in investors. We need to, in the short run, create palliatives, pay salaries on time so that people do not feel these effects. And there should be any form of restructuring or any form of sacking of workers. There should be a hold on that, because we need to work with Nigerians, and we need to give this government a chance, because for every policy, you need to give a gestation period for that policy to be implemented. And so far, we have seen that the government is coming out with policies in the interest of Nigerians. So we need to give them time for these policies to be implemented.
Right.
And over time, I believe that things will get better. Not only state governors, the House of Assembly members, the House of Rep, the senators. It is their responsibility to go out there to promote Nigeria, to be the ambassadors of Nigerians, to go and bring investors. As I said, I was in Ireland last year, and a lot of investors are trying to come to Nigeria. They were talking about security. So we don't need to have the House of Assembly, the National Assembly members sitting in the House of Assembly and just passing on bills. We need to see them going out. Nigeria is a promising country. We have a very robust agricultural infrastructure and land, and Nigeria is blessed. So we need to tap into these blessings, because we have a lot of, we're a consuming economy. We're not producing. We see no reason why we should be importing a lot of things that we need. We can start looking inward, producing
potential,
and creating jobs for Nigerians in order to cushion this effect of poverty and the effect of increase in prices that we are seeing.
All right,
thank you very much.
Dr. Audu. I'm coming back to you, Dr. Jamil. He said something that is quite instructive, because if you look at the inflation basket, the Nigerian inflation basket, the food inflation has been one area that we have been badly hit. It has consistently remained high for well over 24 months. And these things were foreseen, like you would always say. When the insecurities were becoming grievous in our food producing belt, we knew it was going to lead to this. And that became complicated by the ecological disasters that we suffered, some of the worst in our recent history. And there are projections already that this year we will see something in the magnitude that we saw last year, sweeping across over 30 states and wiping out food production. How deep of a mess are we, and what can we do? You know, where are the low-hanging fruits in terms of policy or actions? Because like Ahmed said, the states have a responsibility. The president in the last 2-3 weeks has gone about his business with a sense of urgency, and all of us can see that with the announcements that he has made and all of that. But you don't get that sense of urgency from the state governors. They've been congregating around Abuja for issues that are not particularly connected to the well-being of their people, discussing what in some of our own estimations are more like a waste of time or a distraction from governance. Do you see that sense of, do they understand how much of a problem that we are in and what they need to do, first of all, as individual units and then as a collective to ramp up, for instance, food production? Because it's one way, for sure, that we can bring down that basket and overall impact our inflation numbers. But I would like to get your thoughts on that.
Well, concerning the state governments, I think very few of them understand the enormity of the problem. In the structure, in our governmental structure, I think we need to see a reduction in the governmental participation of the states in the whole Nigerian structure. In essence, what I'm saying is that there has to be more of the federal government, local government synergy than the state government, federal government, or state government, local government. The states have actually impeded the development of the local governments. So right now, what you have is the local governments, the local populations to themselves. The states do not quite understand. Most of the states, I think I wouldn't have an actual figure, but I would say something of 70–80% of the states do not understand what the enormity of the problem is and the structure that is existing. You see, Prof made a very vital statement. Said Nigeria is a consuming nation, a consuming economy. That is very, very detrimental. Normally what we should have, all these palliatives, the palliatives will not actually trickle down to the most vulnerable, except these palliatives have to do with production. Even if you are giving palliatives, make sure you give a kind of subsidy to the productive sector of the economy.
So it's a balancing act.
It's a balancing act.
Right.
Thank you very much. You see, what we have today is farmers going to the farm, they are owned to themselves. The fertilizer issue you are bringing, these things are not supposed to come back. Fertilizer subsidy is a scam. There's a lot of corruption, just like the fuel subsidy. There's nothing, it is not subsidizing anything in the farmers. What you do is leave the farmers to produce whatever they are producing. Create those, our former grain boards. I know there is likelihood of certain corruption there, but they should be more robust than giving subsidy to consumption. In this case, you are giving subsidy to production. Allow the farmers produce, right? If you like, go to their farms, buy off these products,
At whatever price?
At whatever price.
Right.
At the economic price provided by their own production. Then now, it is you who would now know how to subsidize.
And you can price control effectively.
The price control effect.
Right.
You understand? So what you are doing now is you are empowering the farmers economically. You are not just giving them palliatives so that they can just decide any price they want. The demand and supply there would come into effect.
Right. Okay.
Because what you are doing now, if you buy a lot of their products, now provide certain value chains. Whether you are processing these things for export or you are storing them now as a kind of capital investment to stabilize the prices. Just like when you have your naira, you say you have your foreign reserve. The foreign reserve is supposed to defend the value of your naira. The same way you can now have grains stored to defend the value of the food in the market.
Right.
Whenever you have inflation, you try to balance, you flood the market. Right. But now what you are doing is you are now subsidizing what? Production instead of subsidizing consumption. Whenever you subsidize consumption, there's always a problem.
Yeah.
But the palliative will not go down.
Right. Dr. Jamil, the bane of this conversation is largely hinged on limited resources, because that's what the government is telling you. And you just pointed out right from the get-go that it is not sustainable. You can only do it for so long, but you can't do it indefinitely, because at the end of the day, you end up running short of resources. During the President's Democracy Day speech, he did appreciate Nigerians and the sacrifice they're making as a result of the removal of subsidy. But on the other hand, we don't see government making the necessary adjustment to reflect that there isn't enough to go around, that there isn't enough to support Nigerians to make life easier for them, while Nigerians are making the necessary adjustments and the sacrifice. Because in the news today, we hear that the government is allocating 24 billion naira for the 10th Assembly for their accommodation. And I believe in the Oranshire report, it estimated that if we cut the cost of governance, Nigerians could be saving up to 1.3 trillion naira. So going by that report, which I believe most Nigerians will say it is morally expectant of the Tinubu administration to cut the cost of governance, we don't seem to see that happening, especially when you pick up the papers today and you realize that some 400 plus individuals would be gulping 24 billion naira of funds just to cover their accommodation as representatives of the people.
Now, if that kind of money is going to a certain population of Nigerians, my argument has always been that Nigeria is a market. This same money that is going to them is definitely coming back to the market. Right? What people are looking at is who is earning what or who is gaining what. I am looking at the market itself. When N-Power came in, this 30,000 naira per month, you can calculate the amount of money trickling down to the states and the local governments. In that effect, try to calculate the value of the market. When these people collect this money, they definitely go to the market. The only problem we would have is if these monies are converted and then exported out, which definitely they do occur. I know certain government structures or government individuals that find a way of transporting our money out through the dollar. That will happen. But whatever happens, this disparity in earnings, you have to look at it from the structure of the economy itself. How do you distribute the money from one skill to another? That is the most fundamental thing.
Yeah, if we can just cross over to Dr. Audu, because I believe for want of time we are going to have to be very brief. Your thoughts on cutting the cost of governance and how that in itself could actually help the government free up more resources so that it could attend to the larger problem, which is trying to revive the Nigerian economy, especially when you read stories around how government officials are living fat on these resources while the average man is expected to make sacrifices.
You're very right. The cost of governance should be reduced, especially your example of the National Assembly. I think the cost of governance should be reduced. We should take the plight of the common man very seriously. And such amounts, 24 billion going to the National Assembly, such amount can be redirected to provide palliatives, even half of that amount, provide palliatives to majority of Nigerians that are poor. And you notice if this kind of money is redirected to the lower cadre of Nigerians, I mean the lower earning Nigerians, you will notice that it will have a better effect on the economy, because once they get this money, they are going to buy pure water, they are going to buy food, they are going to buy things, and that would increase production. And I'm sure they are not going to use that money to go and buy import food from abroad. They are going to use that money to purchase Nigerian food. And that's going to increase production, and that's going to create jobs. Another thing we have to look into is the lifestyle of the National Assembly members. They should, in the 80s, it was mandated that all government officials should use made in Nigerian cars.
Vehicles, right.
We should encourage production by buying made in Nigerian goods and services.
Thank you very much.
As a government official, you have no business driving Toyota because you're carrying our jobs and giving it to Japan. You have no business driving Mercedes because you're carrying our jobs and giving it to Germany. We should drive Nigerian cars, encourage production.
Unfortunately,
and create
Dr. Audu, I think we're out of time and we have to go. Unfortunately.
One of the policy recommendations, we can also we can also recommend to the new government, even though they are just less than a month old.
Thank you very much.
In the long run,
I wish we can take more from you. We are running against time. We want to thank you for your laudable contributions. We will continue to sustain this conversation as part of our own contribution to upholding governments and holding government accountable to the people. Thank you very much for the perspective you bring on the show once again. And Doctor, it's a pleasure to have you join us in the studio as always.